All right, so, we love getting these deep dive requests from you all. And this one goes right to the heart of the MCU.
It really does. We're
Yeah.
diving into Captain America, the first Avenger today.
Yeah, and you sent over like this treasure trove of information from IMDb.
You weren't kidding?
Oh no, it's the whole shebang, the main movie page. We've got user reviews and then like even some pasted text in there with more reviews and insights.
Perfect.
Yeah, so we really have our work cut out for us to like sort through all this stuff and bring you the best of it.
Absolutely. And that's exactly what we're going to do, right? For our listeners out there, we're aiming to extract the most interesting nuggets and connect them in a way that's fun and engaging. Those aha moments without feeling like you're drowning in information.
Totally. So Captain America, the first Avenger, let's set the scene. This film throws us right into World War II, the 1940s, and man, the filmmakers really nailed that era.
Yeah, they really did. Several reviewers were raving about the attention to detail, the costumes, the sets, even the language they used, period-accurate slang. It's that kind of commitment that creates a truly immersive experience.
Right. It's not just like a superficial thing. It's like they wanted to transport you back to that time.
Exactly. And here's a cool detail. One review pointed out some deliberate anachronisms in the film that actually mirrored the original Captain America comics from the 40s.
Oh, wow.
So it wasn't just about historical accuracy for its own sake. It was about capturing the spirit of the source material within that specific historical context.
That's fascinating. Now, let's talk about Steve Rogers, right at the heart of this story. We first meet him as this guy who keeps getting rejected by the military.
Yeah, after Pearl Harbor, he's desperate to enlist.
But he's just too small, too weak. Some of the descriptions were pretty brutal. A puny 4F man, a 98-pound weakling. Like, he's the opposite of what you'd picture as a superhero.
Right. But here's the thing that really struck me reading through these reviews. Everyone emphasized his character, his determination, his goodness, despite his physical limitations.
Yeah, like that inner strength really shines through.
Exactly. And that's precisely what catches the eye of Dr. Abraham Erskine, the scientist behind the super soldier serum.
Oh, speaking of that serum, one user review I saw compared it to giving steroids out, which, obviously it's way more complex than that. But
it kind of gets the point across, right? This massive physical transformation.
Totally. And it is a huge transformation. We go from this frail Steve Rogers to Captain America.
This muscular superhero with superhuman strength and speed.
But one review I found interesting pointed out that he doesn't actually have, like, traditional superpowers.
Right. It's more like peak human potential.
Yeah, he's not invincible. They said he's as vulnerable as Batman in the right circumstances.
Exactly. And that grounded approach seems to be a big part of why people connect with him so much. Even with all those enhanced abilities, he's still relatable.
And speaking of relatable, that visual transformation from Scrawny Steve to buff Captain America.
Oh, man, that was impressive.
I know, right? One reviewer mentioned how the shrinking of Chris Evans for those early scenes was like a relatively new thing in cinema at the time.
It really highlights how far visual effects had come and how they could tell this kind of story so effectively.
It really sells the before and after.
Yeah.
So, okay, Steve Rogers becomes Captain America, and suddenly he's this national celebrity.
Yeah, the government uses him to sell war bonds.
Right, complete with what some reviewers called a cheesy costume. But it sounds like Rogers wasn't too thrilled about this whole song and dance routine.
He wanted to be on the front lines fighting the real enemy.
Especially after his friend Bucky Barnes goes missing in action.
That's the turning point for him. It's the loss of Bucky, coupled with this desire to actually make a difference that really solidifies him as a hero.
He goes from being this symbol to a soldier with a personal stake in the fight. Now let's talk about the enemy, the Red Skull.
Oh, yeah. Johann Schmidt, this Nazi officer who undergoes his own messed up version of the super soldier treatment.
Right, and ends up as this really ugly crimson character now called Red Skull.
He leads HYDRA, which is basically the Nazis' super evil science division. Some reviews even called it their occult research arm.
That's intense. So Hugo Weaving played the Red Skull, and it sounds like he totally owned the role.
People loved him.
Yeah.
So many reviews said he seals the film. One even described him as wonderfully evil in a nostalgic serial villain kind of way.
I love that. And visually, he's pretty striking, too.
Oh, yeah. There were comparisons to Darth Maul and someone who forgot to use sunscreen.
So clearly a memorable villain.
Yeah.
So we've got Captain America, this symbol of good, and the Red Skull, this embodiment of evil. But it's not just a simple good versus evil showdown, right?
No, HYDRA is developing all this advanced tech.
Yeah. And most notably, they're harnessing the power of the Tesseract, which is described as an extraordinary power source.
Right. Think of the Tesseract as this mysterious, all-powerful object that drives a lot of the plot. It allows HYDRA to create these insane weapons.
And for those who haven't seen other MCU movies, what's the significance of this Tesseract?
Well, it pops up again and again. It becomes the central MacGuffin in the whole MCU.
So it's an introduction here is pretty important.
Oh, absolutely. It's setting the stage for a lot of what's to come. Now, besides the main players, we've also got a pretty awesome supporting cast.
We do Haley Atwell as Peggy Carter, Steve Rogers as love interest, and a tough-acting strategic officer.
Then there's Tommy Lee Jones as Colonel Chester Phillips, initially skeptical of Rogers, but eventually comes around.
And Stanley Tucci as Dr. Abraham Erskine, the guy behind the serum.
And of course, we can't forget Dominic Cooper as Howard Stark, Tony Stark's father.
Who gives Captain America his iconic vibranium shield. So what do the reviews say about this supporting cast?
Well, there was some debate about Peggy Carter. Some reviewers felt her character could have been more fleshed out.
Like they wanted to see more of her agency beyond her relationship with Steve.
Exactly. But others really enjoyed their chemistry and thought it brought a lot of heart to the film.
And Tommy Lee Jones, well, he's always a scene stealer.
Right, bringing his signature dry humor to the role.
And then that introduction of Howard Stark, it's like a little wink to the future of the MCU.
A little foreshadowing for Tony Stark and his legacy. Now, it's not all character development and drama, right? We've got plenty of action in this film, too.
Yeah, reviewers mentioned that car chase in Brooklyn and those big fights with HYDRA.
A lot of people thought the action in the second half was well-paced and exciting, although one person did say it got a little overblown towards the end.
It's always a challenge finding that balance between the origin story and the big superhero spectacle.
You want to show off the hero's abilities, but not at the expense of the story or the characters? And speaking of balance, this film also does a great job with its tone. It's got a great sense of fun, according to a lot of reviewers, and there's a good dose of humor sprinkled throughout.
Which keeps it from getting too serious or heavy-handed.
Right. It's a more lighthearted approach compared to some other superhero films at the time. Now, of course, this being the first Captain America film and part of this whole grand MCU experiment, it had to connect to the bigger picture.
And it does. We've got that post-credit scene with the trailer for the Avengers.
Right, setting up the 2012 team-up movie.
And then Nick Fury shows up at the very end, recruiting Captain America into the modern day.
After he's found frozen in the Arctic.
One reviewer called the first Avenger the flagship relaunch of Captain America, specifically designed to introduce him before the Avengers.
And those connections were crucial for the early success of the MCU. They were creating this whole interconnected universe, which was a really new thing at that scale.
It's all about those threads, those little hints and teases that keep you invested in the larger story.
Exactly. And the ending of the first Avenger is a perfect example. It takes this hero from the past and catapults him into the present, setting the stage for the Avengers and creating this huge sense of anticipation for what's next. So let's wrap things up by talking about how the film was received. IMDb gives it a 6.9 out of 10.
And the user reviews are all over the map. Some people call it a good start to the best MCU trilogy.
They praised the casting, the storytelling, a lot of love for Chris Evans as Steve Rogers.
But others weren't as impressed. Some found the second half a bit slow or felt the villain wasn't fully developed.
One person even called the Red Skull a waste.
Ouch. So what's the overall consensus then?
Well, there were definitely some criticisms, but the general feeling seems to be positive. People really enjoyed the old-fashioned adventure vibe, and almost everyone agreed that Chris Evans nailed the role of Captain America.
He captured that goodness, that earnestness.
Exactly. And one reviewer even questioned why the rating wasn't higher, which suggests a really strong connection with the film despite any flaws. So looking back at everything we've covered, it's clear that Captain America, the First Avenger, was a success. It told a compelling origin story within this very specific historical setting.
The transformation of Steve Rogers into this symbol of hope, the introduction of the Red Skull and this fantastic supporting cast, it all comes together to make a really impactful superhero film.
And it did more than just tell a standalone story. It laid the groundwork for the entire MCU.
Right, it was a key piece of the puzzle.
Yeah.
What I found really interesting was how many reviewers pointed out the film's ability to balance the patriotic elements of Captain America with this core idea that he's driven by a hatred of bullies and injustice.
That's such an important point. It suggests that his heroism goes beyond just blind patriotism.
Right.
It's rooted in these deeper moral principles, which makes him even more relatable and relevant.
So as you continue to explore the MCU, or maybe even revisit the first Avenger, I want you to think about this question. How does placing a superhero origin story within a specific historical context like World War II influence our understanding of that hero's motivations and their impact?
Does anchoring Captain America in that particular conflict shape how we see his heroism in ways that a more modern origin story might not? It's a fascinating question to consider as you reflect on the enduring legacy of this iconic character.
And that's a wrap on this deep dive into Captain America, the First Avenger. Thanks for joining us, and keep those requests coming.
We love exploring these worlds with you.